Yeah, dude,
I'm guessing you're running Haltech for the ECU.
yeah, yeah. So so interesting enough. This is not my first Haltech. The first Haltech was on an FC that I built for land speed that had an RP25 in it.
Oh, wow.
The car went 183 in a mile and a half, so the car was definitely used. But yeah, so that when the Elite came out, they announced it. I'm trying to think when that was. A while ago, long time ago. At PRI, they announced it. This is another one of those stories of triple buying stuff. I had already bought a few other types of ECUs and piggybacks and all that bullshit, and um, I put the Elite on it, and I was bound and determined because it was able to do drive-by-wire. I was gonna make my car drive-by-wire, and I did, and I have to say it's one of the coolest things you can play with. The Elite 2500 is the kind of the flagship. It's currently the current line of ECUs. The 2500 is the flagship. It's our highest ECU. Drive-by-wire, race functions, all that, all the stuff you can think of doing. I used a throttle body from a Tundra. Again, this is like use things you know don't fail.
Yep.
It's so I drive a 2010 Tundra, and I was like, hey, this throttle body is, it's like the right size. So I'm like looking, I measure, and it was like 74 millimeters. I was like, that's what everybody recommends for a JZ to make like really good horsepower and still have the response. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna get me one of these. I got one off eBay for like $60.
Yep.
So I actually modified an intake manifold to run drive-by-wire, delete all that idle air control valve stuff that always fails on JZs, and the thing idles perfect, it cold starts perfect. I'm like, everybody's like, oh, but drive-by-wire feels like crap. Well, that's because they're driving stock vehicles, right? So
Yeah.
mine with the Elite, you can play with the way that the drive-by-wire feels. So you can have a super snappy, over responsive pedal, or you can have a lazy, lethargic pedal and do however you want in between.
Yeah.
And once I dialed that, man, I use rotational idle, which is like an old school rally car thing. That's how they used to um, cool these little engines that would make so much cylinder temperature. They would actually cut a cylinder per rotation and still spray fuel, so it actually uses the fuel to cool the pistons and the cylinder walls and the valves and all of that. So like I was like, cool, I'm gonna use this to idle up, and it sounds rad. But then turns out it actually works.
Hmm.
Like I lost an oil cooler at Grid Life at Road Atlanta in the middle of summer. I don't know if you've been to Atlanta in the middle of summer, but it's a little bit warm. My car, after a rip through the S's, I was at like 265-degree oil temperatures.
Holy cow.
And yeah, dude, they were like, I punctured the oil cooler, looped it, and just said, okay, you know what? I'm going out. I want to drive the car. Well, I cruise through the S's, come to the back straight, and I sit there with rotational idle on. And while I was sitting there waiting to send it down the hill, my oil temps dropped from like 265 down to like 235. Just sitting there. So
Wow.
like the rotational idle thing, that was like a big old ricer, like sounds like a big cam high idle, actually works. So like I was like, this is really cool. I'm gonna use it all the time. So, I mean, like functions like that with like having like a proper ECU is like super nice. Like
Yeah.
even if you don't know how they work, like they're there for a reason.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why like people get so scared of like standalones a lot of the time is because they have so many like crazy functions like that. And if you don't really know or your tuner doesn't know that kind of stuff, you're not going to know how to utilize it properly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's something I spent a little time in the marketing side of Haltech like the last year, and trying to take the scary out of standalone was like my big thing. Like I would give spiels at different like track events about like what things scare you about all of this, and people would talk to me, and I would kind of talk to them, and they'd be like, oh, that makes total sense now. With just a little bit of like Q&A, like it, it stuff out for most people.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool that you coming from like a fabrication background is able to come into like the being part of Haltech and um, being able to like help people with like certain aspects that they wouldn't expect that these standalones can do and will do for you when it comes to um, programming.
Yeah. Funny enough, before I worked for Haltech, I was wiring airplanes. So I was hired as a fabricator at a hangar, and for I don't know why they hired me as a fabricator because like they only brought me things to do because I had a little fabrication shop for a couple of years, and they hired me as a fabricator. Realized that they really don't have that many fabrication needs, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to learn how to do avionics?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So I ended up learning, like electronics and wiring and everything that comes along with doing an installation on an aircraft. And about the time that you would guess you kind of get tired of certain jobs. Well, I was definitely getting tired of working on airplanes and learning how to be a contortionist and dealing with all of that was about the time that I bought my Haltech. And I went in and I was like, I had my big box of stuff because I had gone and I had like ordered it with my now boss. And I just had this big box and I'm like walking out and I'm like, hey, it looks like you need another wiring guy. And just as a joke, and like cruised on out, with my box of parts.